next presenter is retracing the path that's woven together, his experiences and the one that will actually shape his future endeavors. We have with us architect Rahul Gore of Opolis Architects, Mumbai. So let's have a round of cheer. Can we have a round of applause to welcome on stage architect Rahul Gore.
Good evening, everyone. A real thank you to FO8 and Shraddha in particular. She's been relentless in her follow-up. So it's a pleasure to be here and to speak in front of this gathering. I've called this talk Tracing Trajectories because I think architecture is so much about the past. It's our individual past, our experiences, but also the past is also a thrust for the future. And as always, the past leaves a trace. So I think it's always good to look back at your past and use that to think about the future. So the talk is broadly broken into two parts. One, I'm going to talk of something called memories because I think that looks at the past and where you come from. And then going ahead, we'll look at what through our projects and through our life learnings, what we've looked at. Architecture to me is the sum of past experiences. And there are two situations that stand out very strongly. There was once I was traveling in '94 in Europe, and I had the opportunity to visit the Pantheon. And when you're inside, I approached that building and there was like some kind of explosion within you. It's inside your stomach. You can't say why it's happened, but it happens, and that's the power of architecture. A similar kind of thing happened in 1995. I was looking for a thesis topic and happened to visit a building, Manari Gandhi. And a similar kind of a feeling happened. And I think it's that search, my search for a thesis topic ended there. I decided to study why that particular building made me feel the same way. And I think that's essentially the way we've looked at architecture thereafter. Analyzing it is to see how it can, what does a certain space make you feel in a certain way? Why do you feel good? Why do certain details evoke certain emotions in you? And I think that's been the search really for an architecture. So through the process of drawing, and these were hand drawings, ink on tracing, I measured through 4 houses. I learned to look at architecture and tried to analyze a building as to why it made me feel in a certain way. Nari Gandhi had already passed away, so in a way it was just his architecture talking to me, and I think that's a very interesting way to study buildings, just through the medium of drawing, experiencing them, and trying to analyze and feel them. So, but sometimes the exact opposite has happened. Again, in Europe in '93, I happened to visit Frank Gehry's Vitra Design Museum at Weil am Rhein, and it made me literally run out. I don't know why, but it was within minutes. I didn't feel comfortable in that space. So again, that feeling of there was an exhibition on African chairs. Maybe there was yellow tinted light coming in. But what it was, I mean, so it's a very analytical way of looking, and certain spaces do make you feel some way. So I think we've looked at architecture critically in the past I'm very concerned with what makes you react in a certain way. I think historical places are always a super treat, especially one sees the way light, climate were treated by our predecessors. Or the sheer marvel of the Kailasha temple, which to imagine that something from top down can be made into a positive architecture, to even think of a conception of having a form or a shape ready and start sculpting it downwards. Now, contemporary architecture buildings is also, it's very important to look at them, and we all have our heroes. The Bryan Symmetry by Carlos Capa, it was simply mind-blowing for its kind of articulation of scale, geometry, of texture, and right from the concept to the execution to the minutest detail. Or La Tourette, where it's simply the creative genius of the man that was Le Corbusier. I think it's a building that really speaks, and you try and wonder what makes you feel that way. At the urban scale, there is, I think, the Stadelhofen station by Calatrava, which I think very seamlessly integrates the urban fabric within the city. You don't know where the street begins, where the station ends, and it's kind of woven one into the other, again with very old architecture and new architecture marrying each other very well. The Tokyo International Forum by Vignoli in Tokyo, again a very complex program, large program, but integrating it seamlessly into urban spaces within the city fabric. These are exciting projects. Or a very simple building, amongst my favorites is a simple pavilion by Taniguchi, Yoshio Taniguchi, where the only program is to go there and view. There is an awesome view of the sea and there's a park on one side, and this building essentially becomes a bridge between the two. So I think it's amazing to how a non-program building was made into an event. Or for the simple materiality and quality of light that Maki's architecture in Nakatsu has explored. Or the Sox Plaza, which I think has this timeless quality of space one can only dream and aspire to achieve. But on a recent visit, I also had a chance to stay at the India International Center in Delhi by Stein. And I think the proportions of this courtyard were brilliant. So I think that study of spaces right down every time we are visiting, experiencing it, it's very important to analyze, make a quick sketch, and see what makes you feel or why you like some certain thing. So with this analytical mind and thoughts, Sonal, my partner and wife, we kind of set up to do our studio. And we wanted to lay down certain guidelines that would help us navigate our future. And so we laid down kind of principles that were relevant to our studio and to our practice. So I don't expect you to read this, but essentially we want the studio to be a good place to work and learn and grow, both for the people who work in the office and for ourselves. So that's the metaphor for the office as a family. And I think everybody can relate to what a family should offer. So that's essentially how we like to see a studio. So we get asked very often why we Opolis, and I think O comes from our experiences in Japan, where O is given as a respect to, they say always cha is chai, but they'll always say ocha, or mizu is water, and it's always referred to as omizu. So it's a kind of city, and polis is a city, and O is for the respect. So it's a practice about the city. And we also have an underscore to keep it open-ended. So it's a practice about the city. So these other principles I think we set out was, one of them was, we set out these kind of principles. So I think primarily we said, let's build less. I think the topic before this, Swanzal mentioned cutting program, cutting demand. That's very important. Build on less. The lesser land we use is the most critical resource. That's important. Build robust and durable. So you got to build for, keep a time frame in mind. Like if you're doing a house, its a time frame is 20 years, 25 years. We did the BR Museum, the time frame was 100 years. So I think one has to set down your time frame that you want to build, and you imagine this building staying. And build robust and build durable. Because I think that the most buildings, they stand the test of time when you see them 2 or 3 years later. And I think when they age gracefully, that's most important. Build need and not greed. And this is something when we are dealing with houses, especially people want to do farmhouses, weekend homes, second homes. We constantly need to just remind them that build what's necessary, do not build greed, because everybody has huge aspirations. But I think it's, as a role, we keep reminding ourselves and the clients about that. Build in and out. We are in the tropics. We have great weather at times. We have rainy months, but we are fortunate not to have too much cold. So I think getting the relationship between inside, outside, making veranda spaces is a very critical part of our practice. Build light and slender. That's of course to do with structure and use resources carefully. But after all of that, I think the ultimate aim of architecture is to appeal to the senses. So that's, I think, at the back of our mind is the most important. I give that more weightage than any other sustainable parameter. It has to appeal to us. It has to be an architecture that helps us to grow individually. So now coming to the second part of the talk about life lessons and how also these, I think, translate to design. We were, in 2012, we had won the BR Museum competition with Maki and Associates, and we were in the midst of frantic design activity and design development. And Maki wrote this very personal message to Sonal and me. He said, be slow but steady, life is long. And I think architecture as a profession, it's very important to realize at every stage that we got to go slow. And I think what this does is it gives you time to look at your practice, lets designs grow, lets things mature over time. It also kind of resonates what my parents told me quite often, that it takes years to build up a reputation, but in minutes it can all crumble apart. So I think when you go slow and steady, you kind of make sure you take care of that. You build up your reputation gradually. Another very important thing was Professor Chaya. I was at CEPT this first year, end of first year. This boy from Bombay, very fidgety, very impatient, and he took me aside and said, Rahul, do one thing for me. Take a day off and do absolutely nothing. And I think that was amongst the best kind of advices I got. Ever since, I've been regularly doing that. I love my game of tennis, and it's those 2 hours where nothing matters but beating your opponent. So things like that are very important because they help feedback in your design life. But this going slow does not mean infinite time. In fact, we work very structured. What we do ensure is to give attention to detail. It's similar to driving, what you observe when you're driving through a car or when you're going on a cycle rickshaw or you're walking. The speed that you move at helps you to see different things. And similarly, the speed at which you design, especially in the initial design phase, is very important. So we do set time, but make sure that that time is well utilized. I think it's, so with this I'd like to look at the Bihar Museum project, which we won in a competition. It was an international competition along with Markey and Associates from Tokyo. The others were Norman Foster, Coop Himmelblau, Snoeta and Libeskind, along with the Indian partners who were participating in the competition. So this took me back. I worked in Markey's office in 1998, and we had this opportunity to collaborate several years later. But more importantly, the lead architects on the project were kind of colleagues of mine. They were sitting, we were together in the same room working together. I had moved on to do my master's and gone to set up my practice while they had continued working at Markey and Associates. So it was wonderful collaboration to work so many years later, 18 years later. And I think that's very key, because in any collaboration to be successful, trust is the primary factor. And I think we've had a success in completing this project primarily due to this. So that's a Bihar Museum sitting in Patna city with the Ganges River behind. It sits on a 13.5-acre plot, 250,000 square feet of built-up area. The building is 300 meters long, and the site was half a kilometer long. So I think the important part here was Markey's ideas of collective form, which he's been exploring for the last 25 years, especially in the district of Daikanyama in Tokyo. I see this project as a continuation of that idea, where we looked at a collection of buildings, not a iconic building, and to make it really integral to the city of Patna. So at the urban design level, it was very important. But then there was this, you have to tie in all these buildings together, and that's where the material aspect came in. And we've used this corten steel as a symbolic material, not only because it represents a very rich past that Bihar had in metallurgy, but it also helped to unify all the buildings along the street side. So the widest part of the site was there, and that's where the maximum program was fitted in. The entrance was kept away from the two main nodes, and then the children's gallery on one side with the parking beyond. So it's largely a ground plus one structure with only the administration tower that was looking up into 4 stories. The galleries were on one side. There was the entrance area, which was more kind of bi-directional. It had to take people in, it had to receive and disperse people. And then the Children's Museum on the right-hand side was more about being an extrovert and connecting to the landscape. In the section, you'll see it's mainly a ground plus one structure, and only the admin tower had 4 floors in there. Otherwise, it's primarily a completely ground floor structure here. So the entrance is, again, it's quite symmetric, and it's in the nature of an entrance. It needs to receive people, it needs to calm them down, it has to be a correct scale, and it has to let people kind of disperse wherever they want to go. They need some information before which they can move around. So this was the entrance area, the canopy, which was around 25 meters by 25 meters. It had enough space. There was an idea of a group entrance where children and people coming in larger buses could get off, line up, queue up a little bit if they need to get in. So there was this covered walkway which kind of let people queue up if they came in a big group, but this was the main entrance to the museum. And then, so the large crowds, sorry, I'm going ahead. Oops. This monitor and that monitor are showing different, huh? Yeah, now they're showing okay. Sure. Sorry. Yeah, so the large crowds, I think the scale of these reception areas are very important. There are sometimes small groups coming in. On a weekday, there are hardly 10, 15 people hanging around. But on a weekend, then suddenly there are thousands of people coming. So how does one design these lobbies to be sensitive to both the scales without people feeling either too crowded or too kind of alone in that space? And those were important aspects. These are the two large span spaces that are on either side of the reception lobby, with a cafe on one side and the multi-purpose hall. These are like 25 meters by 25 meter spaces again. This is a view of the main reception, then looking towards the right, towards the children's gallery, where one moves ahead and you see a courtyard with terracotta. That's a new material that was introduced primarily to give the children a special character. And then the children's museum itself is this large drum. This is the exhibition designed by Lord Cultural Resources, is not by us, but these were actually replicas, and you could actually touch and feel them. So the kids had a lot of interactive kind of display spaces. And then further out, the landscape kind of connected, and the children were encouraged to use this. There's a museum, there's a study center, there's a learning space, there's actually clay activity, other things can happen in this area. So there's a view looking back from the parking area towards the children's museum. And one comes back to the lobby, and this is actually the direction to the main galleries, with the cafe on the right-hand side. What's unique in this building, I think, is it's got 7 courtyards, and I already showed you 2 which were there in the children's gallery. There are 5 other courtyards, all of them varying scales, varying materials, each one having a particular function. This one's the cafeteria. This is one at the cafeteria and has an amphitheater. The administration tower kind of overlooks the courtyard. Or the exhibition courtyard, which is completely white. It has white gravel. It's meant for exhibitions, but more importantly, the sound quality, because Patna is a very noisy city. And we've used the building masses here, the scale, to kind of make the space really quiet, ideal for exhibitions. There's another view of that same. And you see a bridge that connects the exhibition sequence at the first floor level. And within this kind of exhibition sequence, you have a lounge space where we've introduced the material teak. It's a triple volume space with a skylight where one can move up the staircase, but it also creates a pause. It has washrooms and other areas where one can relax. So the galleries themselves are these black boxes, and they're large spaces spanning 20 meters by 60 meters. Some of them are 20 by 80. And you're moving through these, I think you lose sense of time. So what we've done is consciously there are these cloisters with a lot of natural light coming in, and daylight becomes a good reference at every point to make sure that one is not disoriented when you're moving through these black boxes. These are the cloisters, the passages at the upper level, with the image on the right shows the bridge. But I think the most exciting part of this was seeing the construction activity through. This is a 35-meter large span space designed by Mahindra Raj as a structural consultant. It's basically got 600 mm thick RCC walls with a concrete ceiling, a slab with a elliptical cutout in the center. So it's columnless and it's 35 meters. So I think during the process of construction, that was, for us as a younger practice, was a great learning. We had 4 people from our office based in Patna who are reporting directly to me in Bombay and to our team in Tokyo. So in that sense, a lot of our personal time, including mine, almost a week every month for 3.5 years in Patna. And it's not an easy city to live in, so that was the real challenge. I think keeping people motivated and keep them happy in Patna. So then from here I'll just change scales and we look at a house that was happening in almost parallel with the museum. This is just 1,600 square feet of built up area, and it's located in Khandala. So Khandala, what's unique about Khandala is that it sits on top of the Western Ghats, and that's Mumbai there. And entire rain is kind of deposited there. The first onslaught of the southwest monsoon is taken by Khandala. And it's, if a house is not built well with a good roof, it definitely leaks. I've not seen a single house in Khandala which does not leak. So I think that was at the back of our mind, and we decided let's try and do a house where the plot was quite small, just 10,000 square feet. So we did a house with just plinths and a roof, and we said let's not have any walls. So because the walls, if rain comes at any angle, and walls start leaking as well. So this is the plan where the rain direction is seen in the southwest direction, and there was this roof that kind of leaned into the rain and took the main onslaught of the monsoon. But it's also, this place it was a very young family, young couple, they had young kids, and to use the natural levels of the site and make it as playful as possible was the key concern. So there's an outdoor living room which is basically, it's just open, and it has movable furniture on wheels which can be carted away and put inside a plinth over there, so that the house actually it's only 1,600 square feet. So this is one of those examples of building less. And then because of the rain, we had to deal with the way the rain was drained off the site and other things. So we decided to make that into some kind of an element. And this is a view. This shows how the image on the right, where the roof itself became the wall, and on the left it shows how the roof kind of made space, but it also, because of the levels, one could open up a little bit on that side. I think the key innovations that we looked at in this project, there were several of them, and one of them was to use 4mm steel plates to build up a section instead of using standard sections. So I think what this does is it lets steel be used as steel, and you're really designing for that 4mm thickness, designing the member in such a way that it can be very economically used. Of course, huge credit goes to Manjunath, a structural consultant on this. Another material we explored was the Vasper board, which is using a 50mm paper core with marine plywood laminated on both sides. What this does is it allows the sheeting, the roof sheeting, to kind of span larger areas. Typically you have rafters at every 2 feet or 3 feet maximum. Here we could go up to 8 feet by 4 feet without a support in between. So I think that was a very great innovation. And thirdly, to reduce costs, we used an aluminum frame for a window, but the shutters were made still out of wood. So you got the look and the pleasure of using wood at a fraction of a cost, because the frame takes the maximum wood, it's 6 inches by 3 inches. So that was another innovation, and that's how it came together in that space. So the axonometric shows the zinc roof on the top, the Vasper board, then the steel structure, and then all the levels and the plinths that were there. So the house is essentially just a set of plinths. So with this, I'd like to talk to we learn a lot from our clients, we learn from our teachers, and there's this one statement that sticks out is first agree and then disagree. There was a client, he used to always tell us, you guys are young architects, you don't want to listen to us, so you always very fidgety, you want to just put your viewpoint across. And I think that was a very, very important thing, because you learn to listen and then give your viewpoint, but it also breaks a barrier. You break that ego barrier between the architect and the client. Because if a client comes enthusiastically with the idea and you kind of rubbish it off, his ego is broken there and hurt, and then he's going to kind of quell any idea you want to go ahead. So I think for this project, this client had taught me this, so we decided to use it on him. And it was an interesting thing, because the project sat on a ridge, and the views from that were fantastic. And you can imagine that's the house, and the views from there were fantastic. And it was coming up. We had finished the plinth and the roof structure had started coming up. And the client says, man, this view is unbelievable. But let's go and make a terrace there. And we really want to kind of, the view will be even better from up there. So I had to kind of, at that stage, say, okay, yeah, great idea. But then I had to explain to him that imagine you're just a speck in that section, and if you are 3 meters up or 3 meters below, your view is not changing dramatically. And I think things like this really helped us to understand. So we used it on him, and he readily agreed but I had to say it's a great idea. If I would have said no at that point, I'm sure there would have been a flat roof over this. Another very important thing is to ask this question, is it necessary? We had a professor, Shimizu, who's, Sonal and me are very influenced by him. But more than anything else, he always said that life should be simple, and it's about simplicity. And if for him, is it necessary, was more to do with your personal belongings. But I think when you apply it to the design life, we at every stage really ask ourselves, is something necessary? And then if the answer is yes, you ask yourself again, is it really necessary? And then if your answer is still yes, of course, then the design needs it. So I think that stripping down process is very good. But here we should note that simplicity should not be confused with being simplistic. Because I think the latter, that simplistic, it's got negative connotations, where one does not understand the complexities of a situation. So while simplicity is a state of mind, it's a state of being. So I think to achieve that simplicity is very important. So that's this house that was sitting, it sits on a ridge. It has a view in almost 270-degree angle. You can see that here, and it hugs the slopes as it turns. It's not going ahead, huh? Okay. So you lose sight of the views when you come in, and then kind of when you go down, the view explodes and you see it yourself. I think kids with their inquisitiveness occupy space in the most interesting ways, and I think they've taught us a lot. You design for spaces, but it's eventually the end user comes and changes the way but if you learn to observe how they're using it, I think it helps us to develop spaces much better. Local materials, this house used completely local materials that came from the site. The stone was from the site itself, from the foundations. There's again a difference in the feed. Huh? No, this one and this one is not the same. Yeah. No, this one needs to go one more. Can this one go ahead? One? Okay. So we got an opportunity to look at a library, a public space, a public library. It sits within a park. Our practice has consciously looked at a socially relevant project throughout. So we've done Cross Maidan, we've done Shivaji Park, Chowpatty in Mumbai as urban spaces. So here's an opportunity to look at a library space. There's this existing gymnasium, and they want to make a library out of it. So we thought of, the surroundings were beautiful, so we said let's use the existing ground profile, let's lift the roof and create two zones, one for reading books and one for the store, one for reading and one for the books itself. So kind of free up the boundaries, create a lockable space, and then treat the veranda spaces as a buffer space that can look out into the landscape. And that's how it sits between two streets, and sits within a lovely fully grown park. But we had to retain the existing kind of foundations of the building so that there's no damage outside the footprint that was already identified. So we built concrete walls within it, and now you build up a plinth and then take up a steel structure from there onwards. And that's how it will hopefully come up. It's under process, and let's see how that turns out. So we've used a screen of bamboo in a way, articulated it, detailed it out to make a space that can kind of become a buffer zone between the books, the library interior space and the exterior space. That's another view, and the landscape kind of terraces out where one can do book readings and have social spaces around that. That's a view from the inside. Another very important learning was, any project, we always compromise, and we are looking at clients make our life difficult. But I think it's important not to give up on that one idea that holds the project together. We've had colleagues, there's nothing called perfect architecture or the perfect client or the perfect site. You got to kind of negotiate your way through. But as long as that one idea does not get compromised, I think it's always worth doing the project, because you spent 9 months, 10 months. To walk out of a project is very easy, but to kind of negotiate it and not let go of it till that one idea is really compromised. If that happens, it's not worth it. You have to leave the project. So I think that's something we've kept at the back of our mind throughout, and that's helped us to build a lot, not making sure that we don't compromise on our principles, but at the same time, if it helps to get something built, I think it's always worth it. Also, there's always a conflict between the heart and the mind, and this applies to a lot of things, but I think it also applies to design, because sometimes the logic says something else, but I think if you go with your heart, you never regret it. Anything else you follow, it'll always say, it should have been done, I should have followed that. But if you go with your heart, even if you go wrong, you don't regret it. There's another house we've done in Khandala again, similar kind of a rainfall, but again using the roofs, again a small plot. So again, a young family with kids. Idea was to kind of create a space for them to play around, use as much of the plot as possible to do that. I think my time's up. I'm just going to run through this last project. This is a showroom we've done in Ahmedabad for a brand, Sternhagen, who had this tagline, "Art meets engineering." And I have my friend in Switzerland. We share a friendship that goes back to when I was there as an exchange student, and he was interested in collaborating with us on this project. So we kind of developed a concept of having these pods that were the destinations, had a journey through which you went through, and to have art within that. So we called it Art Meets Engineering, and there was a journey, there was art that was part of the journey, and then there were destination, which were these kind of end, the product itself would be displayed. So that's how it looks from the outside. One important aspect was, they had 2 floors, and how does one make, so we had these kind of cubes within the space when they actually punctured through the slab and came up. That's how we were trying to visually relate the two, so that the person, it was 2 shops, he had to put 2 brands in there at the same time to show that it's like one project. So the shell uses very raw materials, whereas which is the part of the journey, and that has art installations. At the same time, the destination, the cubes itself, are very finished using reflective glass mirrors and high-end materials. The way it was detailed out was very intense. We used materials like brass and mirrors. So I think I'd like to say that you can't connect the dots looking forward, you only connect them looking backwards. That's Steve Jobs' very famous statement. The year was 2000 when Doshi visited us in LA, and we had the privilege of hosting him, which is very wonderful, because he always made it a point to come and stay with the students. So we had an opportunity to drive with him and see Salk Institute. So you can imagine how excited we were, but what was more interesting was to see how excited Doshi was to see Salk Institute, and I think that really rubbed off onto us. So our collaboration on the Bihar Museum and the Mumbai Museum is this thing of looking back. You can only say, going back, that wow, I worked in Marquis' office and we ended up doing a building with him. So there's nothing, you have to live in the moment. At that time, one can never say what's happening. There's another statement that nothing in life is by chance, but you have to make choices and work towards them. I think that's precisely what we've done. This is, again, Doshi had told us this, just do your best, and things will come up, things will fall in place. So it's similar to kind of a river or driving on a freeway, where opportunities come, obstacles come, you learn to push them aside, you navigate through them, and it always throws up new opportunities. So I think that's the way we've kind of approached our practice, and we've looked constantly at working in the present and doing our best. There's another aspect of the destiny of the space, or as I think space has a karma, and so we are just shaping it. Every project we do, everything, it's already predestined. But I think that's a larger discussion we can have another time. But I think that's definitely something that we really believe in, that we are just molding it, and there are too many forces around us. If things fall in place, it'll get done the way it is. Thank you.